Okay. All right.
Oh, it's frozen?
All right. Good evening, everyone. It's Thursday, April 12th. We have a special meeting, budget study session with the city councils. We are going to go over the reviewed proposed budget for fiscal years 2018-19 and 2019 and 2020. There'll be an introduction overview. We'll be talking about the city manager and city council, city clerk, city treasurer, city attorney, human resources, and finance. We'll hand it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, the finance director, Lawrence Chu, and I are pleased to begin the process of reviewing the proposed budget for fiscal years 2019 and 2020, which is represents our comprehensive biennial, 2-year, that is, operating and capital budget for the council's consideration. As noted by the mayor earlier, initially we are going to provide you with an overview of the budget, which includes an explanation of all the citywide expenditures, our revenue projections, our expenditures projections. It provides you with all the assumptions that we have made in developing, in conjunction with the city departments, the budget that you will be reviewing over the next several days. So it provides the umbrella to help you understand how we built this budget and some of the complications that are embedded in the budget that we are proposing for you for the next 2 years. Once we provide the overview of the budget and respond to whatever questions that the council has concerning the budget, the overall budget approach, and what materials are contained within the budget, then we will begin the individual departmental presentations. Each of the departmental presentations are designed to give you an overview of what each department does, and it's not just for the council's benefit, obviously, it's for the benefit of those who are watching at home, so they understand what the core services of each department are, their mission, and then they will provide, each department will provide you with a statement of the accomplishments that they've had over the prior 2 years, which will end on June 30th of this year, 2018. They will also then provide you with a sampling of the goals and objectives that they are establishing for the next 2-year period. And they will, embodied in both of those explanations, will be an explanation as to how the departments individually address the citywide priorities, which we will discuss with you and outline when we cover the city council's budget and the city manager's budget. So that gives you a sense of the process and where we're going both tonight, and that we will go through what are the general government departments that we are going to be looking at tonight, which are the council, the city manager, the city clerk, the city treasurer, city attorney, human resources, and finances. Relative to the other budgets, these are the smallest budgets. So we do more of them on this first night with the overview because it takes less time with the smaller departments. There's just not a lot in those budgets to review. However, starting next Monday and continuing to Tuesday and the following Monday, We will have the larger departments that will take more time to go through each division in those departments, and there will be much more time spent in reviewing the details of those budgets. And we will complete this review period on Monday, the 23rd, and discuss with the council any final direction that you want to make on the budget so that we can then go away and make whatever changes are necessary so that we can come back sometime in May or early June with the final budget for your consideration. So that's the process that we will be using. And so with that, Lawrence, you want to start that? So this provides the council with, and the members of the public who are both here, although it looks like all of our staff are here, except for our planning commissioner. For those who are watching at home, this is an organizational chart that basically shows how the Daly City organization authority stems from the citizens of Daly City, through the elected officials, the mayor and city council, the city treasurer, and the city clerk, and all the authority that the council has over the city attorney, who is a direct report to the council, and the city manager, who is a direct report to the city council, and the appointing authority that the council has for the Recreation Commission, Personnel Board, Library Trustees, and the Planning Commission, all of whom have their authority derived from the City Council's direction to those commissions and boards about what their priorities should be and the variety of responsibilities that are under their respective oversight.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
about the city treasurer? I know that we have, I don't know what the right word for it, but is the treasurer considered an employee of the council or of the city, or is that just, I know we did something, and I want to
Right.
clear up what it is that we
Okay,
have.
so let me provide that clarification. For over 40 years, the prior city treasurer had been an elected official. The role of the city treasurer in the city organization, in the municipal code, establishes that position as an elected position. The city treasurer had the authority to appoint a deputy. And so he appointed a city employee as the deputy treasurer. So when the city treasurer retired, the deputy was appointed by the council to fill the remaining term of the treasurer, the elective term of the treasurer. The deputy city manager, however, as I mentioned, was a city employee who subsequently was promoted as well because her supervisor in payroll retired and she promoted to become the payroll manager. So in recognition of the fact that the city treasurer position has never been a full-time position, the city treasurer was appointed by the council, the deputy was appointed to fulfill the role of the treasurer and, in addition, be a full-time city employee. So Danica Halverson is our payroll manager. She is a full-time city employee. In addition, she has the duties of city treasurer, which are elective duties. And she is fulfilling those duties along with her regular duties as payroll manager. So she is, in fact, an employee of the city.
I see.
But she's also elected.
But also an elected. Now, there has been discussion in the past about the potential for the future of making the city treasurer position a non-elective position, in which case either the current incumbent could continue in that position or someone else could be appointed by the council if that's what the council wanted to do. However, to change it, it would have to go to a vote of the people because it is in the municipal code and it was established as an elected position. But if the council at some point wanted to pose that question to the public and see if they were willing to change that from an elected position to an appointed position by the council, you certainly could put that question before the voters.
Is the salary or the compensation, is it separate or is it?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. So the payroll manager gets her full-time compensation and benefits as an employee of the city. In addition, she receives a stipend for her duties as city treasurer. So she gets additional compensation to fulfill the duties of the city treasurer.
Okay.
And while the duties of the city treasurer are not full-time in nature, they are substantive. There is ongoing work that the city treasurer needs to fulfill each week, overseeing the city's investments, the investment portfolio, and other kinds of things, so that it is necessary for us to compensate this individual beyond just the compensation she gets as a full-time city employee.
What is the stipend for our city treasurer?
Oh, do you have the information regarding this stipend? Do you happen to remember, Shauna? We'll get you that information by the next meeting.
And the way the city clerk's office is structured, it's not the same as the city treasurer? She's not both, or is it the same?
So, no, it is different in that the city clerk, the position of the city clerk, while it is an elected position, it is not considered a full-time city employee position. The city clerk, although she works many, many hours in the same way that the city treasurer does, she's free to set her schedule in whatever way she so chooses. So she does not have a full-time schedule as city clerk. And so, although she does receive also compensation,
I have it if you're interested.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Her biweekly stipend is $832.14.
The city treasurer,
Right.
$832.16. But the compensation that the city clerk receives, in recognition of the fact that she does work a lot of hours, she attends council meetings and that kind of thing, her compensation is greater than that $832 biweekly that the city treasurer receives as a stipend.
What is the city clerk do?
So the city clerk was approximately $832 biweekly. The city clerk, I will look that up, right, sorry.
Yeah, the city clerk will actually be able to tell you that during her presentation. She has the budget sheets, and you'll basically see. But we can, if you can look that up,
I
Shauna.
have it. So the city clerk actually goes from step 1 through step 5. So the bottom step, again, this is biweekly, is $2,287.82. That's at step 1 biweekly. And step 5 is $3,055.32 biweekly.
Biweekly. And at this point, the city clerk is at step 5, so she's at
Step five.
top step. Or I believe she is.
I'm sorry? I think she is at step
Yeah,
1.
I think she is. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions about the treasurer or the city clerk? Okay. Moving on. So,
Oh, I'm sorry, can you go back one more?
oh yes, go
So-
back, please.
The recreation, all the boards, the personnel board, trustees, everything. I know that in some cities, they do have some kind of compensation for them. And has this Daly City ever, in the past, had any kind of stipend or something for the commissions?
Not that I am aware of. And, I mean, we would, if that's something that the council had an interest in, we certainly could survey. I am not aware of many cities that provide compensation to appointed boards and commissions. They may provide reimbursable expenses, so if a commissioner goes to a training session, that they would either pay for it in advance or they would reimburse them the cost for a training. And we have sent planning commissioners to the Planning Commissioners Academy. We've sent library board trustees to library events and that kind of thing, and we will either pay for them, register for them in advance, and the city will pay for it, or else they can be reimbursed. But beyond expenses related to their duties, I'm not aware of a lot of cities that provide like compensation for a volunteer appointment.
Okay.
I was at a League of Cities many years ago, and one of the discussions that came up with a variety of cities was that very question. And cities said no, and they did not pay, and they found the public incredibly willing to participate. And there was one city that was having some difficulty getting people to fill the positions. It was a small rural community, and the problem was travel, and they did not reimburse people for their travel. And once they started doing that, they didn't have any problem filling the positions at all. So I thought that was rather interesting.
Yeah.
That was probably 15 years ago at a League of Cities event.
I think it's very important that the cities support the training and development of those who are volunteering their time in order to enhance their skills as a commissioner or board member. So it is important for us to pay for them to have appropriate training and that kind of thing. And to the extent that any of the boards and commissions desire to have that kind of training, we certainly make it available to them.
Okay. I think didn't we used to have where we would have an annual event with them or something like that?
We certainly did. One of the ways that we did recognize the volunteer effort that is involved in serving on a commission or a board was to have an annual board and commission recognition dinner. And so the city used to host a dinner for the boards and commission members. Right about the time of the recession and subsequent to that, we eliminated that particular activity because of the expense involved. And we did it in a couple of phases. First, we used to take people outside of the city to have that kind of an event. And then we started doing it at Larkham Clubhouse, so we kept it in the city. But it was still a fairly big expense that the city incurred as a result of that. And so it was agreed that we would no longer fund that activity. But clearly, if at some point in the future the city council wanted to reestablish that tradition, then all you would have to do is direct the staff to allocate the funds necessary to be able to do that. So this organizational chart basically shows all the city departments which fall under the management responsibility of the city manager. And you'll be hearing from all of these departments over the next couple of days as we review their budgets. So the city manager has sole responsibility for managing the day-to-day activities of each one of these departments, and each of the department heads report directly to the city manager. So on an ongoing basis, I meet with each of the department heads to ensure their fulfillment of all of the citywide priorities established by the council, and ensure that they are implementing policy direction from the council through me as the council expects. So the council has historically established guiding principles for the city organization and the programming and services that are provided by each of the city departments. The first of those is fostering economic vitality and financial sustainability. That ensures that we're trying to promote economic development, to generate the resources and revenue necessary to ensure the city's long-term financial sustainability. The second guiding principle is to enhance the quality of life for residents. We recognize that what makes a community is the quality of life that people have in the community. Providing programs and services that allow residents to enhance the quality of their lives, whether it be library programs, recreational programs, educational kinds of programming, all of the kinds of things that help residents to grow and develop and to look at the quality of their lives as being enhanced by their local government. The third guiding principle is to promote an aesthetic community environment. That has to deal with the physical aspects or the physical environment of the community, both the land use, the aesthetics in terms of code enforcement and managing the aesthetic look of the community, ensuring that streets are swept, that sidewalks are maintained, and that we're doing everything that we can to provide a community that people are proud of. The fourth guiding principle is to facilitate community building and civic engagement. We do that through all of the various outreach activities in the community, the communications that are sent to the public, both our community newsletter, the Daily News, and our newest outreach tool, which is our e-newsletter, our electronic newsletter, which is the Daily Wire, and to promote the community's engagement in community activities, events, programs, and services, and to help to build community through people being involved in the various programs and services and activities that the city makes available. And the guiding principle, which was the last to be included in recent years on this list of guiding principles, is to create a healthy citizen, healthy community environment or opportunities. As we, as a city organization, have become more aware, both internally among our employees, through the leadership of the Human Resources Department, about how important it is for us to support and provide opportunities for our employees, our workforce, to be healthy. We've recognized that by setting that example, that we also are encouraging the community to be healthy. And so we partner with organizations that promote health-related kinds of activities and programs. We sponsor programs that will promote in a broader way community health.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I guess I have several. I'll just throw it out there. Are these guiding principles something that we have had for a very long time? Is it something that is the best practices to have a limited number, or is it better to have a lot as principles? Is it a modification that should be done every time we do a budget? Is that the appropriate time period? And like, one of the things that struck me is that there's nothing in there about public safety, and I for some reason I just thought it was always something we would have as a guiding principle. But so my questions are, when is the appropriate time? How much can we modify or change it? What is something that, what's the best practice to do that?
Okay, so actually, this is the point in the budget review that you have an opportunity to amend, delete, add whatever guiding principles that you would like going forward. We've done that each biennial budget, and we give the council the opportunity to provide input on both the guiding principles as well as what is going to follow, which is the implementation of those guiding principles through the establishment of priorities. And this is also dovetailed with the guiding principles. So we have each two-year budget inquired of the council whether those guiding principles still make sense or not, if there are things that should be added or deleted. And then also the same is true with the city council priorities. And we have done that during your tenure. This is the first time for the mayor and Councilmember Sylvester that they would have an opportunity, but clearly you and council members Gingona and Christensen can recall that we have solicited input on these guiding principles as well as the priorities and whether or not they should shift.
I'll give you an example, Madam Mayor. When a few years ago, when we had, I think 2012, when I had this focus on the healthy citizen, healthy community, we had, along with passing some legislation in the city regarding healthy communities, we were able to pass a bundle of other laws that affected people and our citizens and our employees by way of adding this. I remember specifically having a conversation about the fact that none of our guiding principles reflected the importance of health, not just in our community, but with our employees. And I think that was the way we approached it that last time. So this would be that time to determine whether or not we can go forward with some other guiding principles.
So I guess also, is it a better practice to have a laundry list of guiding, or is it that kind of limited scope that you want?
So you know, I don't think that there's a best practice that says it should be a specific number of guiding principles. The guiding principles basically represent those broad areas that represent the kinds of services and programs that we deliver through the city, and that basically are the focal point for where resources are allocated. Okay, so you could add more. I don't think that there's a number that, you know, is the magic number. I think it has to do more with what are the activities, programs, and services that we can fund to accomplish certain things. And those certain things that we're trying to accomplish are what the guiding principles are. So if you look at them individually, you can, you know, a subset of each one of them would reflect different programs and activities and services in each of the departments. But if there are others that the council thinks need to be added because they represent things that we are doing differently now or that we may want to start doing in the future, then you could add to that. Unfortunately, I think in recent years, one of the reasons why these guiding principles and the citywide priorities haven't shifted a great deal from in each two-year budget is because we've had such limited resources. So by expanding the guiding principles or expanding citywide priorities, contemplates that we're going to be adding resources to be able to do those things because the staff is already pretty stretched with what they're able to do. Doesn't mean we can't add them. I mean, we can set goals, you know, to try and achieve those things, but we are very limited with the resources available. And my sense of it in the past, when we've had this conversation with the council, is that the council has been reluctant to add more things to the list because they know that we have limited staff and limited resources to, you know, essentially broaden our reach.
Well, what about things like, I guess I'm trying to figure out if it's a principle or is it a philosophy. I mean, I think of things like may not necessarily have an impact on our budget, but have a way of sort of coalescing around common themes of release. For example, the issue of sanctuary cities, protection of immigrants, human rights.
Isn't that quality of life?
Yeah, but I sometimes I think that's just sort
Well,
of
I think that could
broad-
also fall under facilitating community building
Exactly.
because those
Okay.
kinds of activities build community because people feel safe.
Right.
Yeah.
They feel respected, and they feel like the city will take a stand for them. So in essence, like I said, the guiding principles are sort of the overarching, statements of what's important to the council and to the city organization. And implicit in that is the idea that there are a lot of different things that stem from each one of those guiding principles. And so, I mean, you could certainly call out and you could make subsets under each one of the guiding principles and give examples of the kinds of things you're talking about and say, these are the things that we believe facilitate community building and civic engagement. People will be civically engaged if they feel like they're safe, if they don't have to worry, about their immigration status and that kind of thing. If they are afraid of that, then they're not going to be actively involved in the community.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but I mean, if you wanted to call out under any of those specific things that you think are important to highlight, we certainly can do that.
I know in the past that council has had this discussion, and it's very helpful to move to the next slide, which is the things that are the priorities, current priorities, and that's where in the past we've decided if you're going to change how you, what you're going to do under each one of those big ideas, this is where you say, this is the area in which we're going to focus.
And over time, that is true, and over
2
time,
years,
we've
and those
added
have
and deleted
changed
things. Yes,
quite a
we-
bit.
Yes, we have added and deleted things.
Because there have been things that have been accomplished. Then moving on to the next most important thing.
And the important thing here is for the council to realize that this is a proposed budget. It doesn't mean it's a final budget. It's a proposed one. So that's why I said earlier that this is the opportunity that you have if there are things that you want to add, delete. This is your opportunity to decide what those things should be.
And so, Ray, if you look at number 2, to create a sense of community and personal safety, that's much more specific. And that's one of our priorities.
Okay.
And we haven't even got to the money part yet.
Yeah.
It's a coming.
Again, this is the means by which we operationalize those guiding principles. Okay, so this is how it's operationalized, covering all of the programs and services that are offered by each of the city departments. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean we can change certain of those priorities and even some of the subsets of each of the priorities. It doesn't mean that it's going to change the mission of those departments and what they're doing. It just means that at any given point in time, that the priorities may be reflected in a different focus, than at another time. And it just, part of the process of having these budget meetings is to get input from the council to see, do these things still make sense? Are there other things that you want to include on that, under any of the priorities, or are there other priorities you want to establish? But again, we need to recognize that we are limited in both staff and resources to expand a great deal beyond what we're doing, because we just don't have the resources to devote to those things. But again, priority setting is all about, well, this needs to rise to a higher level, and if we do that, then something's going to go down to a lower level. And so that's a way for the council to be able to place more emphasis on certain activities within the city departments over other activities.
And since you said it's biannual, like, this is the moment in time we actually have a reflection time over seeing if any
Right.
of the priorities.
Each time we
change,
each
yeah.
time we, come before the council with a new proposed budget, then this is a time for you to be able to look at that and then provide input. And it doesn't mean that you have to have the answer tonight, because we do this as the overview, as I mentioned. Then we're going to go through each of the departments, and the departments are going to speak to each one of these priorities and how what they are doing accomplishes those citywide priorities. At the end of our budget review schedule on the 23rd, or if there's additional meetings required thereafter, then that's the point at which the council gives us direction about everything that you've heard over the series of budget meetings. So at that point in time, if you come back and say, I've been thinking about these priorities and I think maybe we should consider X or Y or Z, and that would be the time, after you've had time to reflect on everything that you've heard from the meeting today, all the way through all the departmental presentations, to when we come full circle to say, this is a proposed budget. Are there things that you would like to see included that are not? Would you like to see things deleted that we are proposing and replaced by other priorities that you have? That's the point at which you give us direction.
Oh, that's helpful. So basically, over the course of our budget hearings, we're going to have multiple meetings, and then when we have our overview and review at the end, if there's anything that we want to edit, add, or bring forth along the way, we'd be able to do so.
Now, I will say, for the sake of moving the process forward, if there, at any point from tonight forward, if there are things that you are thinking about that you can make a note to yourself, or that, and then provide that information to me, because if there's information we have to go gather, to help cull out whatever it is that you're wanting to do, to identify if we were to do something beyond what we have here, what would the impacts be? Would that require more staffing? If so, how would we get the staffing, or how would we reallocate staff to do certain things? If it's going to require additional resources, where would we get the resources? So to the extent that you already have ideas about things as we go along, it would be helpful if you give us that feedback so that we can begin to pull information together for you to consider at the end before you go forward with a final budget.
Yeah, and for instance, I noticed, these are the city council priorities, but even more so what we've heard from our residents and community members is just how hard it is right now in finding affordability. And so I feel like one of the priorities that could be included in here is how do we support, as a policy initiative, that the need that, what are we doing as far as affordable housing? And I think it's not reflected in our city council priorities, and something that maybe we can include.
Absolutely. Now, when we get into the departmental budgets, you will notice that actually, because of the council's ongoing discussion and direction to me, I have included enhancing, the number and quality of affordable housing units in the city as one of the goals and objectives that the council might want to have going forward. So I did include some information, but this is not your budget. This is just the overview.
Yes.
When we get to your budget, then I think you'll see something related to that in your budget that I've added.
But as
That's
far-
it, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great that that's included in our budget or whatnot. But I think as a whole, like as far as city council priorities, I think it can be embedded in one of the priorities, or even in our guiding principles. I think there is a way to incorporate that, since it is very much a sentiment that we've heard from our residents.
I agree.
Okay. Okay. So, let's see.
And we're moving on to city council priorities. Are these numbered just in general, or are they numbered in the priorities?
So they are prioritized based
Okay.
on input from the council about the things on the list that were the most important to sustaining our local government operations, which are economic development and revenue enhancement, to quality of life like public safety, transportation and traffic improvements, and then so on and so forth. So we'll go through each one. And again, these are suggested priorities. We have solicited council input each time we do the budget about any changes. And so this would be the opportunity for you to make notes about what you think makes sense to either add or delete on this list of priorities. So the first one, obviously, because of the economic downturn with the recession and the impact that it has had citywide across every single department over the last several years, economic development and enhancing revenue to support long-term fiscal sustainability has been a top priority for the council. It has included promoting a more diverse economic base through directed larger business development, trying to bring in larger businesses for both providing jobs for residents here in Daly City, as well as to contribute to the economic base through the payment of business license taxes and other taxes that would help support the services in the city. This particular priority has also envisioned a need to identify more revenue-generating opportunities in the city. The ones that we rely on the most heavily, we're backed up against basically hitting a ceiling in terms of how much revenue we think we can generate from all the traditional sources of revenue. And we're going to hear about that in a few minutes when the finance director and I go through our revenue projections. But identifying new revenue generating opportunities includes things like hopefully developing a hotel here in Daly City. Hopefully being able to encourage the development of a new auto dealership. Those kinds of activities, particularly because they generate both revenue in the case of the hotel, generate revenue to offset services that are provided there, and then in the example of the potential for an auto dealership, that it generates more revenue than services required for that business activity. So we like to look at a good mix of the kinds of development so that one doesn't just continue to require a lot of city services to support it. The second priority, obviously, is one that the council has, and the public, we have heard many times over the past when we have solicited input from the public about what their budget priorities are, that public safety is a very important priority. It helps to, as we say here, create a sense of community and personal safety, and good public safety services are not only important for the community that live here, they're important for future residents who will consider Daly City as a place they might want to live, and/or future businesses that may want to consider Daly City as the home for their business and to support their workforce living in a community that provides a safe environment for them to live and work. The third priority is transportation and traffic improvements. We have seen over the last 25 years the exponential growth of traffic congestion, both on our highway network throughout San Mateo County and specifically within cities, much more traffic congestion. In conjunction with that, we have had to take a look at the impact that that traffic congestion has on pedestrians in the community, both bicyclers and those who walk throughout the city or walk to public transportation. So ensuring the safety of the public, both the driving public as well as the cycling and walking public, are very important to quality of life, and again, contribute to the overall sense of public safety in the community. Because public safety is not just police and fire service, it is the safety that people have as they traverse around the city, you know, in their day-to-day life. The fourth that is extremely important, and the council has heard each time we discuss this priority, that we have a crisis in this country and in this state, not only in Daly City, with aging infrastructure. Cities, counties, the state, and our federal government have invested too few resources in the last 50 years toward maintaining quality infrastructure throughout our country. And we are in a position where we allocate as many resources as possible to maintain quality infrastructure in the community. The infrastructure includes things like streets and roads, but it also includes infrastructure like our water system, our sanitation system, street lighting, which in and of itself is a very big issue for us. All the kinds of things that also promote the public health and welfare and safety. All of those various types of infrastructure that I've just mentioned do contribute to the sense of safety that people have in the community, as well as the public's health. And so ensuring that we can allocate the necessary resources to maintain that infrastructure is extremely important. The fifth priority is leisure services, and that's the real quality of life activities that make a difference in people's lives. The ability to recreate in a variety of different ways that we offer for the community and for members of the community at all ages, from tiny tots all the way to senior citizens, providing an array of programs and services that help to keep people healthy, that help them to enjoy whatever free time that they have, that expand educational and employment opportunities through libraries that provide not just books, but computers and literacy programs, as well as other kinds of structured and passive leisure time activities that we offer to the public that are becoming more and more important, not just for individuals, but for families in the community. The sixth priority is land use, and that relates to enhancing the physical environment of the community, consistent with sound environmental and land use policies. And the council knows that with very limited open space in our community for both development as well as open space for recreational use, we have to really be careful about how we balance those priorities in the community. As a built-out community, most of the development that we see going on is redevelopment. And with that redevelopment and the addition of new housing or new commercial activities, it puts even more pressure on the community to provide other kinds of land use opportunities like open space, parks, and recreational uses of land as well. And so we have to balance both of those things very, very carefully to provide the equilibrium necessary to maintain the quality of life in the community. The seventh priority has always been to identify ways that we can make city operations across every single city department more efficient and more effective, to be prudent stewards of the public's tax dollars in the way that we operate. And so we are continually looking for new and better opportunities to do the work of government here in Daly City and do it at less costs with greater efficiency, and ensure that we are maximizing the use of tax dollars in the delivery of services. The eighth and final priority that the council has established is community and civic support. And that relates to engaging and educating the community to participate in the civic life of the city in a variety of ways, by coming to council meetings, by going to boards and commission meetings, by attending city events, by participating in classes, by making use of the services at the library, at the senior centers, in our recreation centers. Ensuring that the public has access to all of those kinds of facilities, and that when they access those facilities, that they have the highest quality services that we can afford to provide.
I have a question.
Vice Mayor.
So in terms of priorities and how we approach some of the funding that we need to run a city, separate and apart from us, generating revenue and providing whatever we can based on the revenue we have, do you get the sense that Daly City is doing enough to try to partner with private corporations in terms of, and also trying as much as we can to get every single possible grant that's out there? Sometimes I think of things like, for example, our library, and I'm sure we could use some new computers. And I know Daly City PLA is doing a great job helping us with that. But I know that there are other companies that may be interested in funding, let's say, a whole new set of computers if they have if we engage in some kind of partnership with them where they can get some kind of recognition. Some other things that come to mind are like the tennis courts that need some lights. Is there a private corporation who's willing to shoulder the cost of lights if we agree to, I don't know, name the tennis court the Facebook tennis court? I don't know, something. I guess what I'm asking is, are we doing more than just relying on our revenues and tax bases? Do you think a priority could be that we could reach out to more alternate sources of funding that include applying for more grants that's out there, seeking private sponsorship, if you may, of opportunities that may be welcoming to both, corporations and our community?
So when you ask that question, are you referring to corporations that are located specifically here in Daly City? Because we are very limited.
Yeah, no, I'm not just referring to them. I think corporations that are even outside of us are interested in developing some goodwill in all the communities. And if there's a way for them to get involved, maybe they'd be willing to contribute in that way. So that's what I'm thinking.
So we, the staff, and I'll use the example of the library. The library staff, limited as they are, do a very good job of identifying potential grants to support library activities. That, in conjunction with, as you described, the Daly City Public Library Associates doing fundraising, outside fundraising to help support the library with additional funds, has been effective. It's more and more challenging because every city that has a library is all looking for the same kinds of grants. The Peninsula Partnership, the Daly City Peninsula Library System, they work collaboratively together, and they come up with ideas for funding through the county that can then be implemented across all of the cities. And so as not to be in conflict sometimes with what's already being done by the Peninsula Library Service, the cities don't specifically go after additional money because then it lessens the pot that's available for a PLS. But I think, across every department, if there are particular programs, so for example, in my department, in our sustainability program, I got to tell you, Stephen Stolte has done an amazing job, and you're going to hear about it later in my presentation, about leveraging grant money for amazing things to really move our sustainability program forward, to implement Project Green Space, and expand our tree canopy in the city, to install rain gardens, to engage the community in volunteerism. I mean, he has used the opportunities that he looks for all the time for sustainability grants to be able to really leverage the activities that we're engaged in and expand our reach. And he's one person that has been able to do all of this, including getting, giving my presentation away for later, but to get 2 AmeriCorps Vistas to work here for a year to help support Project Green Space, to give him additional staff to work with to do his job. In each of the departments, to the extent that they have staff that have available time to be able to do that kind of search and to write the grants and all that, I think that we are doing it.
Okay.
But I do think that it's hard because, staff is really stretched. So a lot of them don't have a lot of time to spend, a long time researching different grant opportunities. But we encourage them as much as possible to seek out those grant funds. Now, corporations is a different thing. We have not, I don't think, done quite as much in that area because it's, lots of times corporations have a very specific time of the year where they do grant making, and they have very targeted areas that their, organizations determine are the areas that they're going to fund. And our programs might not meet all those criteria. But we certainly, we have done it. We have gotten corporate grants. We've gotten things from like Kaiser Hospital and other organizations to help support activities both in the community through our senior programs, as well as internally health programs that support our employees. So I think we're doing it, but in small steps.
Thank you. So I know it's small steps, but this is just popped into my mind, and I know that we do have some budgetary constraints. But if it yielded more return versus what we would hire for a grant writer, I don't know if that's a possibility. Like if we had someone focused on, being able to be that's their main duty, right? You're saying staff is actually, they're at capacity. But I'm saying if we were able to allocate some funds for that, and yet, hopefully that grant writer would be able to get us an array of funding, whether it's from corporate or from foundations that do like to partner with municipalities or federally, right? Like, I think I've asked several times, and I know that staff is at capacity, but would we be able to do that? Because I think maybe if we need someone really targeting and looking at, like, for instance, I think he's doing a phenomenal job, and it's obvious he's he's searching for all the opportunities, Stephen, which you're going to present about. And so maybe we need someone in all the various needs that we have, that we are identifying to find out those grants.
So I don't think it's a bad idea. The caveat that I would have, though, is that hiring a single grant writer is not going to yield grant opportunities across every department, because grant opportunities are very targeted in specific areas. In a grant writer, even someone like Stephen is focused on his area, sustainability. And when he's looking for things, he knows all of the sources to go to, the things to research for sustainability grants. So if I were to tell him to go research grants for, the Public Works Department, it's not going to be as effective because that's not his area of expertise, And so having one grant writer who knows every city operation and what, programs, what grant opportunities are available for all those different city operations, I think would be challenging. So if you had one area where you really wanted someone to be writing grants, then hiring a grant writer to target that area might yield those results. But it would be hard to cover every single city department with one grant writing position.
Sure. And maybe that's how along the way things could be allocated to certain departments, right? Like where is there room in some departments that are able to do grants, and where in some areas they have the leeway and some of the areas they don't. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's definitely a comprehensive way of looking at things, but I guess we're just looking at ways, as the Vice Mayor mentioned, how do we find more resources, given the fact that, we're here again at budget looking for resources. And maybe, if we do indicate one area, if it's, an area in economic development or public safety, or, I'm just saying in general.
Well, public safety does an awfully good job of doing their own grant writing. Okay. They have staff. The police department has more staff than any department in the city.
So I just said, I didn't say that. I was identifying
I just meant that what I'm saying, though, is that that's an example of where they are employing the resources they have in their department to identify grant-related opportunities, and they have been very successful because they bring them to you. The council, authorizes the acceptance of grant money whenever they've received those kinds of grants, and they do a very good job.
I would just like to have a sense that we're all the departments are trying to reach out and find all available funding opportunities. That's my goal. It's just,
well, I think that's one thing that I would suggest, that as you go through each one of the department presentations, that you question the department heads about this, because I think you will be surprised that every single one of them will give you examples of things that they have done over time to secure grants for activities and programs in their departments. So it is an ongoing effort. Now, it's not sufficient to be able to gain millions and millions of dollars for us, but it certainly has been successful in providing resources for programs and services that they might not otherwise be able to provide. So I would ask each department head that question.
okay.
And I might like to suggest that for going forward is that we have either an annual update or something of grants that have been received. I mean, you don't want to bog down every council meeting with all the grants and stuff that,
Right.
but if we could have it like just a written list.
Or even what's been applied for. I'd like to see the activity.
And like some, I've actually been on grant reading teams and grant writing teams many times as an educator. And some things are, you just can't get a grant for them because there's no such grant available. They do not generally support salaries and wages. It'll be an introduction 1-year pilot program. It will be a piece of equipment. It will be something like that short term. And I've also worked with grant writers who are usually, like the city manager said, very specific in their area, because when you write that grant, you have to be incredibly knowledgeable about the actual topic, whatever it is. I mean, you have to know the nitty-gritty language. You have to structure everything just right, because the people reading it, they're going to be the people from that specific field, and they will spot a phony a mile away. So
an example
yeah.
of what Judith is referring to is one that I actually did bring to the attention of the council. When we were trying to get a SAFER grant to restore
yes.
Engine 95, we did hire an outside consultant to write the grant application. And while it was very competitive, unfortunately, there were just so many applications for the funding that we didn't receive it. But the outside grant writer that we hired was someone who was just, as Judith said, very specialized and very knowledgeable about the SAFER program and how to approach writing that application. I think that individual, while we didn't get the grant, our chances were greater by having hired that individual than if we had written it ourselves.
yeah.
Councilmember Sylvester.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to apologize for being a little tardy. And I'd like to talk about a couple of things. The priorities that we went over, are they in order of
Yes.
what we feel?
They are in the
Okay.
order
All right.
of how the previous
All right.
councils have established them, but they're not
Okay.
written in stone. They can be shifted
Great.
in whatever way the council
right.
chooses.
I'm looking at slide number 6. And we basically, as city council and everyone here, staff and et cetera, we are here at the behest of the citizens of Daly City. So as I look at your priorities, I thinking about making, or would like to consider, now I do understand, and this is for brevity, that we can go into further details on each particular priority. This is just like the 30,000-foot level,
Yeah.
basically, the overview as to what we as council would like to see. But I was looking at item number 7 and 8.
Which page?
I'm sorry, this would be on slide number, we'll talk about city council priorities beginning with slide number 9, 10, and 11. So, item number 6 I'll talk about is land use. I think that should be moved up between items number 2 and 3, considering our priorities have changed in the area of affordable housing and the need for it. So coming up with a way to, because of our limited land that we have, a priority should be moving towards affordable housing as a top priority. So I would put that between 2 and 3, between public safety and transportation and traffic improvements, because I feel that if it's in between those, transportation and traffic improvements will come. Now, it's just a thought, and I'm sure we can discuss this later on as we move through. Item number 7, government operations. And number 8, I would move number 7 to number 1, or make number 8, community and civic support, as number 1. Because I say that because of the organization chart, we serve the citizens of Daly City. So they should come first in the chain. So 8, 7, move those up. And lastly, and getting more in-depth, number 1, I will have questions for economic development in identifying and revenue-generating opportunities to expand the economic base. How do we get there? What methods are being used at this particular time? What is the outreach being conducted? Transportation, east-west routes. We have no problems with north-south, but east-west routes. And what can we do as a council to ensure that that comes about? And my last comment, Ms. Martell, I'd like to commend you in the sense of, I know I have contacted you on various grants. You have either, well, not have either, you have taken the initiative to provide a follow-up immediately as soon as you get the information. I'm sure that others may have contacted you, and you are absolutely correct. It takes someone with the knowledge of city operations, because grants can be very, very specific. I know throughout this past year as being here on the council that we've hired a lot of consulting firms. And kind of going down the route that the mayor had mentioned earlier, a specific grant writer, I'm looking more as to the overhead of a grant writing consultant firm who they obtain all the information about Daly City, and I'm sure we can provide it, what our current operations are, and that they move forward and do a grant search on a constant basis. So it's just maybe something that we should look at rather than tasking each department. It's good to task each department because they are the experts in what is needed. But at the same time, maybe they don't have the opportunity to always be on the lookout for these grants. So a collaboration with everyone together to include a consultant firm might be a way to go.
So I can give you an example, council member, of one that we actually are using because it is a critical project, and that is the firm in Washington, D.C. that we have retained, the Ferguson Group, which is a government affairs organization. We hired the Ferguson Group specifically because we are in search for funds to help us to be able to implement the Vista Grand Canal construction project.
Yes.
As I've mentioned to the council in the past, that project is about $110 million. We don't have that kind of money in this city. We don't even have half of that in this city. We don't even have a quarter of it in the city in the Water and Wastewater Department to pay for that. So the Ferguson Group has been working with me and the Director of Water and Wastewater to identify funding opportunities at the federal level, in the federal budget, among several different federal agencies, which you may recall, I went to Washington, D.C. to meet with those agencies, to meet with representatives on Capitol Hill, our representatives, to talk about the need to fund this project. Subsequently, they went with us to Sacramento to meet with agencies there. And as a result, we actually have an application that we are putting together that hopefully is going to generate some significant funding for us, and have identified a number of different funding opportunities that are in various timelines over the next few years for us to apply. So that's an example of an organization that can do just that, and depending on what your needs are, they know all the different funding sources in the federal budget as well as the state budgets to help support those kinds of activities. So, so we do make use of that because that's an expertise we do not have within the city organization.
Got you. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other comments or questions? I know these are city council priorities, and I just was wondering if we've ever been able to, I know this is the 30,000 feet level of it, but if we've ever kind of had metrics associated to these priorities, just in general. I think seeing it from a very, this is our priorities, but then when we look back or we were to assess, I don't know, where we're at. I think it's easier to kind of see where we've been, and I know the departments are gonna be sharing the great work they've been doing, but I was just wondering if there's any sort of metrics that we can.
So there are metrics. The departments themselves, as you go through each of the department budgets, they have performance metrics that they use, and they will talk about the results that they've been able to deliver across certain areas of their operations and programs. So again, this is just the overview right now. When we get to the specifics of the departments, you'll be able to ask each of the department heads and their staff those kinds of questions.
Thank you.
Okay, we need to move forward because we're going to be here all night long. But I wanted to ensure, because I do respect the fact that we have two members of the council who this is your first time going through this process. And I want you to know exactly what the process is and the ability that you have to provide input that can add, delete, or in any other way change what the proposed budget looks like. Okay, Lawrence, let's move on. No, go ahead.
Now we look at some of the major trends for the fiscal year 19 and 20. First problem is the revenue growth net behind the increased cost of doing business. So we expect a CalPERS employer contribution rate increase by 18% every year between fiscal year 19 and 20. And the pension obligation bond payment also increased by around 4% each year for the next 2 fiscal years. I will provide the council with more detailed information. This is just a summary only. And the City Council has approved the salary and benefit adjustment to maintain a competitive workforce in Daly City. And the second challenge is to maintain the current core service of all the city departments with the reduced staffing level. When I look at the budget for the fiscal year 17-18, the last round of budget, the city cut 26.8 positions in the budget. And for the proposed budget, 5 positions will be impacted. So when you add the 5 positions, 5 in the current year, yeah, those are all vacant positions.
They're all vacant?
All vacant position. So when you look at the total FTE reduction for the last budget and the current budget is around 32 positions. I will provide with more information when I present the reduction by department.
And that's out of a total staff of about 500.
Yes. So
That's a pretty high percentage.
So after all the reduction, the project FTE for the citywide will be reduced to 455. I'll present you with more information later. I have a table show the historical trend of the FTE for the entire city.
I remember when it was in the 700s.
It was in. We are looking at just the full-time staff only. It does not count the part-time staff, the 455 I just mentioned.
But you are right, Councilmember Christensen, in the 90s, we had upwards of several hundred employees.
I was around there, not here, but out there.
So with the reduced staffing, it is extremely difficult to maintain all the critical program service for the entire community. The other major challenge is to develop a funding plan for some of the general fund ongoing structural deficit. This includes how to fund the escalating pension contribution to CalPERS, how we are going to fund the portion of the retiree health. On the retiree health, the city only contribute around 50% of the annual required contribution. I'll provide you with more information later. And then the underfund operating costs for each department. Over the last few budget, we have been asking departments to cut the operating costs. It's around 2% decrease every year. So when you add the 2% decrease every year for the last few years, equal to around 5 to 6% of the total operating cost of the general fund. In addition, defer maintenance of all the city facility. Whenever there's any budget reduction, we only fund the salary and benefit, and we always push these maintenance costs for the city facility in the future years. And the last one is to how we are going to enhance all the revenue and to recover the city costs for providing service to the community. For the fiscal year 19 and 20 budget, those are some of the measures we have tried to maintain to keep the operating cost low. This includes we cover only the basic operation only. We continue to restrict all the controllable costs. We eliminate all the vacant positions in all city departments. This includes the police department as well. We also continue to implement the prepared cost sharing for all city employees. On the revenue side, we project a realistic increase in the sales tax, property tax, and utility user tax. Those three major taxes are the three major tax revenue for the city. The next bullet is we review and audit the fee schedule to achieve full cost recovery for city service. We also rely on gas tax to fund street and traffic control maintenance activity within the city. And we will also implement a ballot measure for the TOT and the business license increase in the November 2018. Now we look at the fiscal year 2019 and 2020 citywide expenditure budget. This table summarizes the fiscal year 2019 proposed budget by city department. The first column is the general fund proposed budget. Total general fund budget for fiscal year 2019 at $85.4 million. The second column is the proposed budget for the other funds, including internal service fund, gas tax, enterprise fund, are projected at $86.5 million. The second column, the $86.5 million, include budget for the enterprise fund, is the water and wastewater and the water and wastewater budget. The proposed budget for the water fund is $19.8 million. And the proposed budget for the wastewater fund is $23.8 million. The very last column is the total proposed budget for the city at $172 million for the fiscal year 2019. The next slide summarizes the fiscal year 2020 budget by department.
I have a question. Column 2, that is additional costs?
No, those are the other funds other than general fund. This is outside the general fund.
So in library, for example, that 1.3 million would be from what?
From other funds, I can provide you with more information when we present the library and recreation budget.
Okay, so don't give us this in detail.
Because
Great.
there are other departments, they have like a multiple fund within a department.
Right.
So we combined all the other funds together to show you, okay, this is the total budget.
Total cost to actually run that?
Yes.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Like very good example is like in library and recreation, general fund is 10.3 million, other fund is around 1.3 million. So the total budget is roughly around 12 million for the library. And when department they present a budget, they have very detailed breakdown the general fund cost and also what is included in the other funds.
Great, thank you.
Okay, now we look at the citywide budget for fiscal year 2020. General fund budget increased by around 4.5 million to 89.9 million. The increase is mainly due to salary and benefit adjustments. Other funds decreased by 3.7 million to 82.8 million. The change is mainly due to Housing Development Finance Agency. They earmarked $6 million in fiscal year 2019 for the future affordable housing project. So when you look at the ECD budget, the prior year, fiscal year 2019, ECD, the other fund, you see a $7.5 million. Fiscal year 2019 budget, row number 6, ECD other fund is $7.5 million. Out of that $7.5 million, $6 million is earmarked for the future affordable housing project. So for fiscal year 2020, the total citywide budget is $172 million. Now we look at the key driver for the structural budget deficit. This slide is a high-level summary. I will get into the detail into the next few slides. On the expenditure side, salary and benefit account for over 75% of the general fund budget. Project increase in workforce costs, such as healthcare, overtime, and salary adjustment to maintain a competitive workforce will be a charge for the city budget in the future years. In addition, CalPERS costs are projected to increase 18% annually between fiscal year 2018 and fiscal year 2020. And city contribution to CalPERS will be a major charge and are projected to be an increasing share to the general fund budget. Pension obligation bond debt service payment increased by 4% annually from $3.8 million in 2019 to $4.6 million in 2024. Assuming on a pay-as-you-go basis, the retiree healthcare costs are projected to increase by 5% annually from $3.4 million in 2019 to $4.7 million in 2026.
It's worth noting that the numbers that the finance director has just laid out are numbers that are absolutely outside of our control, but they are obligations that we have that transcend the obligations we have for delivering other kinds of services in the city. And while none of us feel good about confronting that, we don't have any other choice. And one of the things that's important for the council to understand is that whereas in the past, when we had several hundred employees, active employees that were contributing to funding our retirement obligations, today we have so few employees and so many retirees that our active employees are not contributing sufficiently enough to fund the rate increases. So, and that's something that we foresee is not going to change in the future. It's just going to keep, and we have some graphs that are going to illustrate for you, but it is a critically important issue. And it is not going to change unless we were to be able to project and tell you with any amount of certainty, which we absolutely cannot, that ongoing revenue for the city would, moving forward, would be in excess of 15%, which there is no way we can project that kind of revenue growth in the city. And not even if we got a bunch of new businesses. That kind of revenue growth is not realistic. But in order to offset those 18% increases that we are obligated to pay before we pay anything else, we are going to face this challenge ongoing between the PERS rate increases, the debt service on those bonds, and that outstanding retiree health. And as Lawrence pointed out, we're not funding all of our outstanding obligations for OPEB going forward. We can't. It's a huge number, and it shifts every time our retiree base increases. The actuarials are completed. That amount shifts. There's no way we can fund it all, and we're not trying to. So in the past, I know some of the employee groups have been concerned that that's such a huge number, we're never going to be able to fund it all, and so we shouldn't try to fund it. Well, we have to contribute to it, but the reality is that we are not funding it all, and we are allocating resources that potentially could, if we were able to fund everything else, could be going to pay down that liability. But we don't have those resources, so we're not paying it down. We're doing the minimum that we possibly can get away with is what we're paying for that.
The image I like to hold in my mind when thinking about this is that we've fallen into a river and we're trying not to drown. And we're floating down the river and our nose is just barely out of the water, and occasionally it splashes up over. So we're just gasping a little air just to keep alive floating down that river. We're not actually getting to the place where we can put our feet down on ground and walk out.
And you're absolutely right. One last comment before we leave this particular slide. You know, when you look at this slide and you look at the first item, which is the workforce cost, that's what it costs us to pay our employees who work here, who deliver all the services in the city. So at first glance, you might think that those workforce costs, you know, are overarching, and that no matter what, those costs have to be met before anything else is. But as you look down the list, all of those expenditures that we're facing, those huge increases, are a direct result of those workforce costs. So the two are not, they're not separate issues. We don't have a workforce issue over here in terms of costs and then all these other things. They have to be looked at collectively, because in order for us to maintain a quality workforce, we have to be able to pay competitive wages and provide health care and all those things. But it is those very things that we need to do to have a competitive workforce that are resulting in the increases below that, that are making our ability to support those workforce costs much more difficult to achieve every single year. Okay, Lawrence.
On the revenue side, the city does not have a diversified revenue base to support the city operation. We are over 65% of the general fund revenue are coming from the property tax, sales tax, and utility user tax. Proposed budget for the fiscal year 2019 and 2020 include the use of $3 million of excess ERAF in each fiscal year to balance the general fund budget. And it is very important to note that the excess ERAF is a one-time revenue and which should not be used to fund the ongoing expenditures. In summary, the project revenue lag behind project expenditure increase, such as the PERS contribution and also the salary and benefit adjustment. Okay, now we get into the detail of the CalPERS employer contribution rate. This chart illustrates the historical CalPERS employer contribution rate between fiscal year 1991 and 2018, and the projection for the next 10 years. The red line above represents the employer contribution rate for the public safety. The blue line below represents the employer contribution rate for miscellaneous. Because of the investment loss during the recession in 2008, CalPERS increased the employer contribution rate beginning in 2013. As you can see, between 2013 and 2018, there was like a very steep increase in employer contribution rate for both the safety and the miscellaneous. Then in 2014, CalPERS approved the new demographic assumption changes and increased the employer contribution rate again in fiscal year 2017. Then in 2016, CalPERS lowered the discount rate from 7.5% to 7%, beginning in fiscal year 2008. Discount rate means the assumed rate of investment return that CalPERS earned over a period of 30 years. The discount rate change will phase in over a period of 3 years. So in fiscal year 2018, discount rate lowered to 7.375%. Again, in 2019, it lowered to 7.25%. And in fiscal year 2020, the discount rate lowered to 7%. So that means whenever the investment rate going down, then you'll see the employer contribution rate will increase steeply to make up the difference. Because of the steep rate increase, PERS costs are projected to be an increasing share of the city budget in the coming years. This chart shows the projected CalPERS employer contribution between fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2028. The red bar above here, the red bar, represent the employer contribution for safety. And the blue line below represent the employer contribution for miscellaneous. And the green line above represent the total employer contribution for both safety and miscellaneous. Projected CalPERS employer contribution increased 18% annually between fiscal year 2018 and 2020. So in fiscal year 2019, the first year of the biennial budget, the projected CalPERS contribution at $15.9 million. This represents a $2.3 million increase from the prior fiscal year. In the second year of the biennial budget, the project CalPERS contribution at $18.7 million, a 2.8% increase over the first year of the budget. When you add the $2.4 million in the first year and the $2.8 million in the second year, it's almost like a $5 million increase in the 2 years budget. So as I mentioned before, the PERS contribution rate increased 18% the first year and then another 18% in the second year of the budget. So the steep increase outpaced the average general fund annual revenue growth of 3%. And in February this year, CalPERS voted to reduce the amortization period from a 30 years to a 20 years. Just like you pay instead of a 30 years mortgage, you have to pay off the mortgage in 20 years. Effective June 30th, 2019. This means any investment gain or loss recognized in June 30, 2019 will have a 20 years of amortization. This will impact the employer contribution rate beginning in fiscal year 2022. It is projected that miscellaneous contribution rate will increase by about 1% in the next 10 to 15 years. And the safety contribution rate will be much higher. So the change is in addition to the chart that I shown in this slide. Any question on the CalPERS rate?
Yes. Mr. Lawrence.
I just have one question. When these rates go up, employees who work for Daly City, are they under contract that the city will pick up a certain percentage?
The city has a employer contribution that it makes separate from the employee contribution. Our employees contribute themselves, and they always have.
Yeah, well, what I'm getting is that with the rates going up, do the employees then have to pay a little bit more?
For the employee, for the safety is always like a fixed at 9%, but their bargaining unit, they do have like some additional cost saving, cost sharing. For the miscellaneous employee is 8% employee share, and there's some bargaining unit, they do have like additional cost sharing, but most of the increase will be picked up by the city budget. So that means it will be either the general fund or other funds that pretty much like pick up all the CalPERS employer contribution rate increase.
So the short answer to your question, council member, is no, they don't automatically have to increase their contribution as the rates increase. And if they do, it's a negotiated agreement that they will contribute some amount beyond what they are obligated currently to provide. So in the course of negotiations, the reason why, as Lawrence pointed out, some of the groups pay an additional amount is because they negotiated that agreement to pay in exchange for an additional benefit they received. So we cannot just impose that employees would pay for those increases that CalPERS has imposed on us.
But we as a city remain responsible to pay?
We
Or-
certainly do, yes.
Okay, thank you.
From our projections in the past, have they been pretty much, as we project, like 2 years prior on, especially the CalPERS, has it been, when we finish our budget, is it usually on the same amount when we?
The target amount is pretty much like it's right on target. Usually there might be like some adjustment, maybe around $100,000 or $200,000 variance.
Okay.
But pretty much it's very accurate because we have CalPERS provide the rate, and then we have the city actuarial do the individual actuarial report. So that means we compare those two together. So it's only like usually it's around $100,000 to $200,000 variance. Is very accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Now we look at the CalPERS unfunded accrued liability, the changes between fiscal year 2015 and 2016. Total pension unfunded liability increased by 43 million, or a 38% increase from 115 million in 2015 to 158 million in 2016. And due
That
to
should make your heart skip a few beats right there, just that change.
And due to all the CalPERS actuarial assumption changes, it is projected that the pension unfunded liability will be increased significantly over the next few years. Now we look at the pension obligation bonds. In fiscal year 2004, the city issued 36 million of pension obligation bond. Proceeds from the sales of the POB were sent to CalPERS to prepay the pension unfunded liability. As of June 30, 2018, total outstanding principal and interest for the next 6 fiscal year are 25.1 million. The table on the right shows the POB debt service payment increased 4% each year, from 3.8 million in 2019 to 4.6 million in 2024. The next table shows the escalating debt service payment.
I have a question on this one. So, the pension obligation bonds are paying our CalPERS. So we basically borrowed some money to pay this. And
So,
this is the
let me go back to the
interest on it,
prior
right?
few
And the
slide
debt
is-
services are interest.
And when you look at the CalPERS employee contribution rate between 2000 and 2002
Yeah, we
and
didn't pay
3,
anything.
we did not pay anything because they have like a super fund situation that the investment return is sufficient to cover the employee contribution. So at that time, the city, the city changed the retirement plan to a 3% at 60 for the miscellaneous.
So it's the enhanced retirement formula that essentially that this pension bond is paying for.
So in 2004, it's expected that once the city issue the 36.2 million POB, it will pay off all the unfunded liability associated with the enhanced benefit at that time. But unfortunately, CalPERS, once we send the money to CalPERS, they lost quite a lot during the 2018 recession and housing market collapsed.
Wish we could go back and undo that mistake, but we're stuck with it.
Now we look at slide number 25.
Well, actually, in response to that comment, we are responsible for it, but the state Supreme Court is actually reviewing whether or not cities have a constitutional right to roll back enhancements of pension formulas that may have been granted over the years, and whether it would be in conflict with employee vesting in those enhanced benefits. A determination hasn't been made yet, but that is a question that's being raised about whether or not cities could, instead of just prospectively changing the retirement formula for future employees, if they could roll back to the original formula for current employees. And then there's the added question of whether it would apply to retirees or not.
Yeah, boy, talk about a hornet's nest.
Exactly. But it is being
Because you've got
considered.
people planning their lives
Right.
based on what their retirement's gonna be.
Right.
And that enhancement for the people who are new on the council, that enhancement was a 50% increase in pensions. It was 2% for your retirement, and it jumped from 2% to 3% of your salary, the formula, where it's 3% of your salary times the number of years that you've worked. So that was a huge increase, and people have planned their lives based on that, but we can't afford to pay it. So it's an ugly situation all the way around.
Go ahead.
Okay, this table shows the escalating debt service payment of the POB. The debt service payment increased 4% annually from 3.8 million in 2019 to 4.6 million in 2024. And the escalating annual debt service payment of 4% outpaced average annual revenue growth of 3% per year.
And this, you did say, but I lost the year. When will this be paid off?
You'll be paid off in 2024.
Oh, okay.
So we are like 6 more years.
I'll live long enough to see it, all right.
Now we look at the OPEB retiree health. As of June 30, 2016, the OPEB unfunded liability is estimated at 59.5 million. On a pay-as-you-go basis, projected OPEB costs will increase by 38% from 3.4 million to 4.7 million in 2026. The blue bar below represents the general fund share of the OPEB, and the green bar above represent the other funds like the internal service fund, enterprise fund, and so on. So for the fiscal year 2019, the general fund share of the OPEB is 2.5 million. And in fiscal year 2020, the general fund share of the OPEB is 2.7 million. Now we look at the general fund revenue projection for the next 2 years. This table shows the performance of the general fund revenue for the current fiscal year 2018 and the projection for the next 2 fiscal years. The first column is the fiscal year yen projection with a total revenue of 82.4 million. The second column, highlighted in green, is the fiscal year 2019 general fund budget with a projected revenue of 81 million. The last column is the fiscal year 2020 proposed budget with a total revenue of 84 million. Now we look at the property tax, the first line item, property tax. Property tax is projected to increase to 33.6 million in 2019 and 34.8 million in 2020. This represents a 3.5% increase for each fiscal year. And the increase is mainly due to strong home sales in the Bay Area and high assessed value from the county assessor office. Now we look at the second item, the sales tax. Sales tax is projected an average increase of 2.8% annually due to strong retail and auto sales. The next item is the utility user tax. UUT is projected decreased by 2% annually from 6 million in the current fiscal year to 5.7 million in 2020. This is mainly due to a decrease in UUT long-distance revenue and consumer disconnected landline service. This impacts the city revenue in the UUT. The fourth item is the other tax, which include the hotel tax, TOT, and business license are projected to increase 1% annually for the next 2 fiscal years. Number 6, license and permit, such as building permit, electrical and plumbing permit, and plan check fee, and code enforcement. Let me repeat that once again. The license and permit include building, electrical, plumbing, plan check fee, and code enforcement revenue are projected at 2.7 million in 2020, a 17% increase from 2019 due to increase in construction activity and anticipate new development project in the second year of the budget. Number 6, fines and forfeiture increased by around 12% to 3.5 million in fiscal year 2019 and 20 due to increase in parking fines. Item number 9, charges and fee. This includes planning fee, engineering fee, and zoning fees, increased by 24% to 4.2 million in fiscal year 2020. This is mainly due to anticipate new development project in the second year of the budget. Number 10, program fee for the library and recreation department. Budget at 3.4 million in 2019 and 4.2 million in fiscal year 2020. Item 11, miscellaneous revenue. Miscellaneous revenue are budgeted at 3.7 million in both fiscal year 2019 and 20. This amount includes the 3 million excess EREF revenue that we use to balance the budget. And the very last item is the interfund transfer. It's budgeted at 3.2 million in fiscal year 2019 and a slight increase in fiscal year 2020. This amount includes a 3.1 million revenue in general fund cost allocation.
I have a
Question? I have one also. Go ahead, sir.
So my question is, where would, if it's possible at all, where would any revenue from a marijuana tax be on that table?
It will be, if we have that, it will be under the other tax,
Okay.
which include the other tax include the business license, hotel tax, all the miscellaneous tax we budget here.
And then what fiscal year would you, if it passes and if we did everything we're supposed to do, including it on the ballot, when would you forecast that being on which fiscal year?
So we forecast the first revenue most likely will be in fiscal year 2020, the second year of the budget.
2020?
Yeah.
Okay. And where would, if the Airbnb issue was settled, where would that go?
It will also go under item number 4, other tests, because other tests include the TOD, the hotel test.
Okay, and
So
then what fiscal year would you anticipate that?
I would say it will be the second year the same, second year of the budget.
2020. Okay, that's it.
You answered part of my question. Thank you so much. Redevelopment fees that the city is due to get back is not guaranteed to get back from the state. Are we making any thoughts about that?
Remember that when we closed the book in the, I have a slide to show you. Let me move forward very, very fast. Okay, here is when we closed the book in fiscal year 2016, we have a loan receivable from the former redevelopment agencies, 13.8 million. And when we closed the book in last fiscal year 2017, we have another 4.6 million. So when you add the two together, it's almost like a roughly close to around 80 or 90 million. So that means any revenue that we get will be used to offset the loan receivable. So it won't be a general fund revenue.
So that would, where would those funds go and what category?
It will be category in another fund, and is the fund 2. We have created a separate fund to keep track of all those loans receivable and also the revenue that we will receive to offset the loan receivable.
So will you be going into that later on in the presentation as a separate account?
Yes, it will be a separate account. We will present that when we do the final, when we present the final city budget 2 weeks from now.
Thank you.
Because the real temptation when you hear about we're going to get all this money is to think about how to spend it. And when you look at our financial situation, it's already been spent. I mean, anything we can, any increases in revenue have already been spent. That's
when you look
just
at
with
the
all of our structural deficit.
when you look at the city expenditure in 2012, you see there's a spike here.
Yeah.
This is the time that we write off 21 million loan related to the former redevelopment agency. Right now, we start getting some of the receivable back beginning in the current fiscal year. Remember that we have already write off here already. You see that in 2012.
Yeah.
Let me go back to my to the slide here.
28.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide, slide number 20.
Oh, just a quick question. The passport money that comes in, which category is that? Is that under 11?
Miscellaneous revenue. It's under
Yes.
miscellaneous revenue, yeah.
Yeah.
And the city clerk will present more information about the the passport revenue
Oh, excellent.
when she presents the budget. Yeah. Okay, now move on to slide number 29. This pie chart shows the general fund revenue by category. Total projected general fund revenue for fiscal year 2019 at 81 million. And this pie chart shows the city heavy reliance on the property tax, sales tax, and UUT. The 3 major general fund revenue sources bring in 52 million in general fund revenue, or this represents 64% of the total general fund revenue. And it is very important to note that the property tax and sales tax is sensitive to economic downturn. Any change in local economy, home sales value, and unemployment rate will have a huge impact to the general fund revenue. Now we look at the property tax between fiscal year 2008 and the projection for the fiscal year 19 and 20. When you look at the property tax, you see that due to the housing market collapse in 2009 here, the following year, the property tax decreased by almost 95% in 2010. You don't see that right away. You usually see that like in the next year and the following year due to the foreclosure of a lot of like home in Daly City. And since 2012, the property tax has stabilized. It is projected that the property tax will increase by around 3.5% annually to 33.6 million in 2019, and another 3.5% increase to 34.8 million in fiscal year 2020. This chart shows the sales tax between the fiscal year 2008 and 2020. The green bar on the right are the estimate for the current fiscal year and the projection for the next 2 fiscal years. This chart shows the sales tax is highly sensitive to economic downturn. Sales tax dropped by almost 15% in 2010 due to recession, and project sales tax increased by 2.8% annually to 12.3 million in fiscal year 2019 and 12.9 million in fiscal year 2020. This is mainly due to the strong retail and auto sales in Daly City. This pie chart shows the Daly City does not have a very healthy mix of retail, commercial, and industrial business. When you look at the chart, over 92% of the revenue are coming from general retail, transportation, and food products. And those 3 categories of sales tax are highly sensitive to any economic changes. The general retail include department store, furniture store, and drugstore. Transportation include new and used auto sales, auto repair, and the revenue from the gas station. And food product, we have a lot of like a very good restaurant in Daly City. And we have like a supermarket, so they're bringing a lot of revenue. So it's more in Daly City, so we can get more sales tax revenue. Okay, now we look at the UUT between fiscal year 2008 and 2020. Project UUT revenue decreased by 2% annually, from 5.7 million in decreased to 5.7 million in 2020, which is 16% below the peak level in 2008. In 2008, the UUT revenue is approximately 6.9 million, and now we project at 5.7 million. This is mainly due to the consumer, the resident, they drop the landline service at home. We talk about the excess EREF revenue. Now we look pretty much the next 2 slides will be focusing on the excess EREF projection for the next 2 fiscal year. And the excess EREF is a minimum funding requirement for the school in California. And each year, the county and city get back some of the property tax revenue when the revenue are in excess of the amount needed to fund the local school. In recent years, the state has increased the funding for the school, which translates to high draw from the county EREF statewide. And in California, only San Mateo County, Marin County, and Napa County, they get the excess EREF revenue. And this is mainly due to high property value in these 3 counties. Because the excess EREF is uncertain and it is not guaranteed in the future, so the excess EREF revenue is categorized as one-time revenue, and it should not be used to fund ongoing operating expense. So any excess EREF revenue above the budget will be used to replenish the general fund reserve. The table below shows the excess EREF revenue the city received between 2008 and 2017. The green bar on the right are the projection for the fiscal year 2018, 19, and 20. In order to balance the budget, we use one-time revenue of excess EREF, 3 million each year.
So that's an important thing to note here, because the council has established a very long-standing fiscal policy that we don't use one-time revenue for ongoing expenditures. But because we've taken the position that excess ERAF would be used to replenish general fund reserves that we have used in recent years to balance the budget, we feel it's an appropriate use in presenting this budget to rely on that excess ERAF revenue. However, we really need to emphasize that it still has to be considered a one-time revenue, and that to the extent that each subsequent year, each future year that you get it, that you allocate that to the reserve. And if you have to rely on the reserve, then you can use the funds, but don't assume that that money should be used to fund ongoing expenditures as a way to grow programs and services and other operational costs.
I have a question in the same manner that I asked prior. With the projection for ERAF, when we get the actuals, what is it, the target? What is the variance when we project for ERAF?
Fiscal 2018, I think we are very close on the target. It's around 3.4 to 3.5 million, very close on target. The reason we dropped that to 3 million next year is because when you look at the average between 2013, and even if I include the projection for the 3.5 million is on the higher side, so we take a little bit more conservative project at around 3 million. When you look at 2014, 16, and 17, it's roughly around 3.1 million. Do we assume the property value of Daly City will keep on going forever? I don't think so. At a certain point, there will be a tipping side that it will going down. So we want to make sure that all the revenue that we put in the budget is a solid number. Again, if we get additional ERAF, more than 3 million, we will put that into the general fund reserve that will be used for the future budget.
Thank you.
And hasn't there been talk that that money will in fact, the excess ERAF will most likely disappear at some point in the future?
There was like a discussion before, but again, it's really depend on the home sales, the property value in the local economy, and the most variable factor will be the state, how they fund the school. If they want to provide more funding to the school, so that means it will be a more draw from the excess ERAFs countywide. Any question on the excess ERAF? Okay, now we move on to the 2019 and 20 general fund expenditure projection. The general fund expenditure are divided into 7 major categories. The first category is salary and benefit, which make up 75% of the general fund budget. This item include employee salary, benefits, and retirement, such as pension payment to CalPERS. The second category is service and supplies. It makes up around 10% of the city budget. This item include animal control costs, police crime net fee, parking ticket processing, police range expense, election expense, professional service, phone charges, and utility charges. The third one is the program cost just for the library and recreation department only, the third one. The fourth category is other charges, including bad debt, education expense, membership, education, and lease payment, which is only about 2% of the general fund budget. The fifth category is the fixed charges from the internal service fund. This includes building maintenance, general insurance, information services, mail and messenger service, postage, telephone charges, and vehicle expense. The sixth category is the capital outlay, which is mainly for the police and fire equipment. So they budget around $200,000 for each fiscal year. The last category is the transfer out. This is mainly to account for the general fund transfer to the senior center. For the fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2020, the general fund subsidized the senior center operation by around $450,000 each year.
And I might add that that's in addition, that we subsidize the senior center programs. We get funding from the county for the food program. We get funding annually from the Dolger supporters, and but we still need to subsidize it because the program there is not able to cover the costs. So even if we ask for a donation for meals, then it doesn't cover the cost of operating the senior centers.
This table shows the general fund expenditure by category. The first column is the estimate for the current fiscal year. The next two columns highlight in blue are the proposed budget for the next two fiscal year. Project budget for fiscal year 2019 increased by 4% to $85 million. Proposed budget for fiscal year 2020 increased by 5% to $89.9 million. And the table also shows that over 76% of the general fund expenditure are used to pay employees' salary and benefit. And only 24% of the general fund expenditure are used for the operating expense. Salary and benefit increased by $3 million in fiscal year 2019 and $4 million in fiscal year 2020. This is mainly due to CalPERS rate increase, pension obligation bond debt service payment increase, and also salary and benefit adjustment for city employees. Now we look at slide number 39. This pie chart shows the general fund project expenditure for fiscal year 2019 at $85.4 million. Over 76% or $65 million of the general fund expenditure are used to pay for salary, benefit, and retirement. This pie chart also shows a detailed breakdown of the $65 million. So of the $65 million, the 75% of the general fund budget, almost like half of them, 46%, is used to pay for employee salary. Around 12% or $10 million is for the employee benefit, like the employee health plan. And 17%, or roughly is around $15 million, is used to pay for CalPERS. I just mentioned in the prior slide the capital outlay for police and fire equipment account for only 0.2%, or just around $200,000 for the $200,000 for the general fund budget. Another way to look at the general fund budget is the proposed budget by department. We look at slide number 40. Public safety, include police and fire, make up 63% of the general fund budget, or $54 million. Library and recreation at 12%, or $10.3 million of the budget. The entire general government at 8% of the general fund budget. Non-departmental include retiree health, miscellaneous charges, operating transfer out, and the service and supplies is around 6.5% of the general fund budget. And public work in the last round of budget, they have already moved a lot of the general fund operating costs to other fund. So the remaining 4.1 million represent the park maintenance budget. And there are some general fund operating expense, ECD, Proposed budget is 3.8 million, or 4.5% of the general fund budget. We just look at the general fund revenue and general fund expenditure. Now we put the two pieces together to look at the general fund summary. Projected revenue for fiscal year 2019 is 81 million. And the projected expenditure is 85.4 million, resulting in a general fund deficit of 4.4 million in 2019. And the proposed deficit for fiscal year 2020 is 5.7 million. So when you add the two together, it's almost like it's over 10 million budget deficit for the next two fiscal year. I would like to point out that the proposed budget for fiscal year 2019 and 20 already include a 1.5 million reduction in each fiscal year. So for the two fiscal year, general fund has already reduced the expenditure by 3 million. And even with that, we still have a structural deficit of 4.4 million in 2019 and 5.7 million in 2020.
So the 1.5 million, those are cost-cutting measures?
Yes.
That the city has, that the different departments have made and that the city has made overall?
Yes. Slide number 44 shows a detailed breakdown of the reduction. I can go over that right now. This slide summarizes the proposed budget reduction for fiscal year 2019 and 20 with a total saving of 3 million over the 2 years. General government reduced the operating expense with a total saving of $200,000 for the 2 years.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Lawrence. I see you skipped number 43. Do we have to go to 44?
Yes, I'll go back to 43
Okay.
soon. Yeah.
Okay, you go back. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
ECD will eliminate one vacant senior building inspector position and add 2 building inspector positions with a general fund net impact of $200,000. Library and recreation will eliminate 1 vacant recreation program supervisor position and 1 vacant library assistant 2 position. They will also increase the fee and reduce program expenditure with a total saving of $400,000 for the 2 years of the budget. Police department, they will freeze 2 vacant police officers and 2 vacant police sergeant positions. They will also reduce operating expense and hourly staffing with a total saving of 2.4 million for the next 2 years. Public work will transfer 0.43 FTE. This is the Director of Public Work position from the general fund to other fund with a total saving of around $200,000 for the next 2 fiscal year. So when you add the first year saving of 1.5 and the second year of saving of 1.5 million, so the total reduction in the proposed budget is 3 million. Let me go back to the prior budget, slide number 43, just to show the council what the city has cut in the last round of budget. This is the fiscal year 17 and 18 adopt budget reduction. The city manager office contract out the community service center, and 3 field position was eliminated. And police department, they freeze 6 police officer position with a saving of 1.1 million each year. And fire department, they eliminate 1 fire engine company through attrition. And they also eliminate 2 vacant positions with a total saving of 3.8 million in the 2 years of the budget. library and recreation, they reduce program and also eliminate 1.7 field positions with a total saving of $400,000. General government, the city attorney office eliminate 1 vacant deputy city attorney position, and with other reduction equal to around $500,000 saving for the 2 years. Public work through reorganization and the elimination of 2 key working position is a vacant position. So the total saving is a $700,000 to the general fund budget. So that means in the last 2-year budget, we have cut almost like in the 2017 budget, the total FTE reduction, net of the transfer to other funds, is a reduction of 26 positions here. Any question on the last year budget reduction and the proposed budget reduction for the next 2 fiscal year? Question?
So to put it in perspective, and you'll hear it more directly from the departments as you see the individual presentations, the impact of all of these budget balancing strategies that we've had, with only a few exceptions, has had a serious impact on our ability to continue to deliver services at the levels that historically we were previously able to provide services. And I say with only a few exceptions because in certain instances, budget balancing strategies that were implemented actually resulted in equal or better service at less cost. So an example of that was when we eliminated police dispatch from the police department and contracted with San Mateo County. We were able to achieve the same or better level of service at a savings to the city. But in most other areas, these budget reductions have resulted in less service and minimal savings because, as you see, as Lawrence has shown you from what we had previously reduced in the budget and what we are now proposing to reduce in the budget, the more that we keep eliminating positions, it reduced costs for a period of time to help us to balance it, but we have never been able to achieve, even with all of these very, very draconian reductions, we haven't been able to achieve in and of itself a balanced budget. It still has required us to use reserves to balance the budget, even with those reductions. So it is having a huge impact on every single one of the operating departments and their ability to continue to provide services. And I've said to the council a number of times over the years, we used to say in Daly City years ago that we do more with less. But the reality is that since the recession, we have to do less with less because we just don't have the staffing to be able to continue to deliver services at the level that we used to. And it's having an impact. It is stretching the staff in every single city department to the absolute limits of what they're able to do. It leaves very little free time for staff to be able to pursue new initiatives or to take on new activities because they can barely do what they need to do each and every day that they're at work.
And of course, the public expectation is not reduced. I know a lot of us probably up here, my colleagues as well as everyone else, hear complaints from the community that says, well, you used to do. I mean, that's how it usually starts off, and it's, yeah, we did used to do, but we can't afford to do it anymore.
This chart shows the general fund revenue and expenditure between fiscal year 2009 and 2020. The blue line above represent the revenue projection, and the red line represent the expenditure. So between 2009 and 2012, general fund revenue dropped slightly below the expenditure. And in the current fiscal year 2018, the general fund revenue barely equal to the expenditure with a little bit surplus of around $600,000. So the projected expenditure for fiscal year 19 and 20 is much higher than the projected revenue, resulting in a structural deficit of $10.1 million over the next 2 fiscal years. Again, this is mainly due to the CalPERS employer contribution rate increase, OPEB cost increase, escalating pension debt service payment, and salary and benefit adjustment to maintain a competitive workforce. Now we look at the general fund reserve projection for the next 2 fiscal years. The city reserve policy is to maintain general fund unassigned fund balance equal to 15% of the annual budget expenditure. In fiscal year 2019, $4.4 million will be used to balance the budget. So the projected general fund will drop to 21.5% in 2019. In the second year of the budget, $5.7 million will be drawn from the general fund reserve to balance the budget. And the general fund reserve will be reduced to $12.7 million, or 14% of the reserve target. Another way to look at the performance of the general fund reserve is how much money we have in the bank to keep the city operate. The GFOA recommend the city keep at least equal to 2 months of operating revenue or operating expenditure. So the city general fund spend an average of around $7.3 million each month to pay employee salary and the other operating expense. So in fiscal year 2019, the general fund revenue is equivalent to 2.6 months of operating expense. In other way, it's around 80 days of reserve. And in 2019, it dropped to 1.5 months or 50 days of the operating reserve. Now we look at the historical staffing level between 1985 and 2018. When you look at the staffing level in the current fiscal year 2018, it is pretty much the same what we have 30 years ago. In 1985, we have around 452 FTE. 2018, it was 460. And since the recession in 2008, the FTE have reduced by 16%, and we have already cut 93 positions. So the FTE has dropped from 553 positions in 2008 to around 460 positions in 2018. And at the same time, when you look at the city population between 1985, it's around 82,000, and the projected population for 2018 is 110,000, which is a 34% increase over the last 30 years. But our staffing level remain the same. With the current reduction of additional position, so the projected general fund FTE will be reduced to 455 in fiscal year 2019 and 20. Now we move on to the next session. I'll turn this over to City Manager for the City Manager closing comments.
Okay, thank you. I have a quick question before we proceed about the redevelopment agency. I know, unfortunately it dissolved in 2012, but at that time when we did have the redevelopment agency, was there any funds that we would receive from the state?
The redevelopment Mr. Chu just provided a little while ago an explanation of the outstanding loans that are now being returned to the city, but it's going to be over an extended period of time.
Okay, but if there was, for instance, in the future, if the redevelopment agencies were reinstated, were there state funds that were allocated to the different agencies? It's just a general question.
No. So in fact, when the redevelopment agency was created in Daly City, part of the reason why we have these loans that are being returned to the city is because the city used general fund dollars as loans to get the redevelopment agency activities moving, because we didn't have revenue to do redevelopment activity initially. So the redevelopment agency envisioned that over the life of the redevelopment project areas, that with new development and activity, that revenue would then be transferred back to the general fund. Unfortunately, the life of the redevelopment agencies were cut short prematurely, so we never were able to realize the repayment of those loans. So the city's general fund, until we receive the money back from the state, essentially we're still out the money that we use to seed redevelopment activity.
And that's, I see, yeah, and that's what was stated in the document. And do we know how much we get every year?
So very rough estimates around $800,000 to $900,000. Again, you take over 20 years to pay off the loan receivable.
Okay, thank you.
I have a
And that's
question.
not a hard and fast number, right? That's
It all depends on the property value. So that means it will change slightly each year.
somewhat flexible.
Vice Mayor?
Could you go back to slide 46, Lawrence? Okay. So my focus of my question is how good are we at these projections? And so my first question is, for example, in 2017, the actual projection for our general fund reserve as a percentage of expenditure is 28.4. What was the projection that we made prior? So what was the projection we made during the time we had to study the numbers?
Remember let me go back to the price slide, in 2017, the general fund revenue is roughly around 86.5 million, which is not much higher because this includes a loan receivable of 4.6 million from the former redevelopment agency. And also at the year end, there was some additional projection, mainly due to the increase in construction activity. So ECD, they realized additional revenue in that area, that resulting in a positive fund balance in 2017.
So I just want you to answer the question about what was the actual projection.
Let me see.
I understand the reasoning and things like that, but I wanted to know how good were we at these projections?
Let me look at the spreadsheet.
My recollection over time is that the projections that we have made have not deviated all that significantly. But for one-time revenues that might have come through that we didn't expect, that increased the amount of overall revenue. But because we didn't consider that ongoing revenue, it was segregated out. But I don't think that over time, as I recall, that we have been
You don't think we've been
more
off?
than a few percentage, maybe not even a few percentage, maybe less than a couple of percent off, with increases that came in at a higher rate than we projected.
And in 2017, the project revenue is 77.7 million. And the actual result when we close the book is 86.4 million. Again, out of that is over 4.6 million is due to the loan receivable. And there was, as I mentioned before, there was like an increased revenue associated. Can you hold on? Let me.
So it was 4 million, am I right? 4 million
Loan
more.
receivable. So it was, again, a
Okay.
one-time
Yeah, I
event
got
that
you.
occurred.
I
yeah.
got you, okay.
And most of the time, it's like there's always like a unanticipated development activity that will drive up the building fee and construction fee, engineering fee when we close the book. And there's no way that we can project those development activity 2 years ahead of the time. But in this round of the budget, we have already included additional projection due to anticipate a major development in Daly City in the year 2 of the project. Can I put in more projection? Yes, I can put in more revenue, but will that project realize? There's no guarantee. So that's why we usually try to project as accurate as possible by the time we put together the budget. So when we do the mid-year budget update in 2019, then staff will come back and present the revised budget for the second year of the budget. Then we'll look at the budget again in the fall of 2020.
And that's why we go through the process of adjusting the budget at mid-year. We come to the council and we review with you where we are at mid-year to make up for any of those changes that might have occurred that we didn't anticipate, that a project started sooner, and so we began to get building fees sooner than we anticipated, or that it came in less than we expected because a project that we thought was going to go forward didn't go forward. And that has happened. You know, another example of those deviations from what you might expect is sales tax. So everyone has assumed that because there's been an expansion of Ceremony Shopping Center that our sales tax revenue should be up by huge amounts. Well, it may over time, there may be increases, but we're not seeing a huge spike that we can attribute to the development over there. And in part because the development wasn't all completed from January 1 of last year, so you didn't have a year's worth of tax receipts. Many of the new stores over there opened in the third quarter, late in the third quarter, or closer to the holidays, close to the fourth quarter. So we won't see the benefit of those tax receipts until a year from now, or a year from then. So, you know, we do the best that we can to project with all the tools that we have. We also use our consultants, Muni Services, that assist us with our sales tax analysis, and they follow trends, and they've followed the, you know, what Daly City's sales tax receipts have been over a long period of time, and so they use their best, you know, projections to give us advice about what we should be thinking of in terms of what a reasonable increase of sales tax would be without being overly optimistic, where we might then budget based on that, and then it may not turn out to be, in fact, an accurate projection.
Okay, the final question I had, Lawrence, you had said that the structural deficit we have is based in large part due to the expenditures we had on pension obligations and salaries to be competitive, things like that. What I'd like to find out is what are the percentages of, for example, what the pension obligation is? Like, which is the higher categories, pension obligations, or was it salary increases? What's the percentage of that?
I can show you right away. It's right here. When you look at that, is the highest one is the salary increase.
Okay.
Because it's like if you have like a 5% increase of the 39.6 million, it's like a very high dollar amount. The next one will be the retirement.
I guess my question is, I saw that chart, but my question is, does that reflect the increase in expenditures? Like, does the 46%, does that mean that that's the big chunk of the expenditures that increased, and that's why we have more expenditures?
No, that the 46% include out of the 85 million general fund expenditure, 46% is salary, 12% is benefit.
Right, that's not my question, though. My question is, you said that we had an increase in expenditures because of 3 factors: OPEB, salary increase, these pension obligations. So my question is, of those 3 categories, give me the percentage breakdown of how much those increased. I hope I'm making myself clear. I don't know if I'm... Thanks, Pam.
I think it's in here someplace.
No, I think
Maybe
that-
not as a percentage, but maybe as a dollar amount.
There's a dollar amount, but not a percentage.
I think that's going to require an additional calculation,
Okay.
which was not presented in the sense of, you want to know the increase for each particular category. And
Yeah, I
how
want
it
to
relates.
know,
I
Gotcha.
can
What
show
was the
you right
biggest
here.
one?
Give me just 1 minute.
Okay. I get your question.
You get my question?
Oh, I get it.
Okay.
Is this, right? It's basically what out of these percentage
Yeah.
for each of them.
I think later on down the line, it's good to have that information, because this is not over yet.
Yeah.
But it's something to follow up on.
Are we going to go past a certain hour, or is it, did you plan on having everybody?
Well, no, we have the listed departments from your schedule, which is city manager, city council, we have human resources, we have city attorney.
We're going to do all that tonight?
Well, that was the plan, yes.
I have the answer for you.
Okay, all right.
Let's go back here. So for the salary category is fiscal 2019, we project 39.6, and for the fiscal year 2020, we project a 41 million. This represents a 4% increase. And for the benefit is 10.4 million for 2019. It increased to 10.9
That's
million.
not the question.
Yeah, Lawrence, I think he's asking, so if you reference page 18 and you talk about the pension, is that correct,
Yeah.
Vice Mayor? The pension obligations, OPEB, out of those, and PERS, out of those particular obligations we have, what is the percentage?
Percentage of what?
Of what, yes.
So,
You
okay,
need the total
Of the
dollar
increase.
amount,
No,
and
no,
what
so-
percentage of the overall increase that is?
yes, yes,
The
yes.
So what we really want to know is what the dollar amount is for each one of those costs increase.
Right.
And then compare that with the percentage to the total budget, or just to what?
No, I don't
If we
need
have
to
the
compare.
dollar amounts, we're good, we're good.
I don't need to compare it to anything. I just want to
Okay.
know.
Like retirement going up by around 15%, citywide the general fund benefit going up by around 5%, salary is around 4%.
That's what I wanted to know. That's what I wanted to know. Okay, so the salaries that, the big pie that went up,
So,
It's the salary.
yes.
okay, and then the pension obligation was what?
Pension obligation going up by around 4%, and the
4%.
retirement is around 15%.
Okay, and the salary was
Salary is around 4%.
4?
4%. Remember the
Per year.
4%. The 4% is the 4%. Let me show you again. It's general fund expenditure.
It's the debt service, right?
Well, then, so the big one is the obligation,
Mhm.
the pension obligation.
The pension total
It's a 4% going 4% of the 39 million. So that means like once you add 34% to 39, so it jumped to 41.1 million.
Okay.
Small percent on a higher number, but when you look at retirement, it's a very high percent on a lower number. So it means like retirement is 14.8. Yes, it's a 15% increase to 17 million. When you look at the difference between 17 and 14.8, it's almost like a 2 million increase just the retirement.
Okay.
So that means I would say
So raising wages and benefits
eventually we will
makes a huge difference all the way
impact
down.
some of the
line.
all the way
like
down the line,
costs. Yeah.
because it rolls up and it
Yeah.
causes what you're paying towards retirement to increase, and when you pay more towards retirement, then you add that to the escalating cost for the pension bonds,
Right.
you know, so increased salary has a direct impact on the retirement costs going forward. And then the pension obligation amount is gonna escalate until 2024. Eventually that'll go away. But the
PERS
PERS
not
rate
going away.
increases
Yeah.
will continue on, and you'll still have the unfunded liability for retiree health care.
If you ask me what would be the major budget deficit driver, is the retirement cost increased by 2.3 million for the 2-year budget each year. And the next one is the salary adjustment. It's around 1.5 million. And then the benefit is only around $500,000. So when you add the three together, is equal to 4.7 million. Then when you look at the general fund,
Yeah.
deficit is around 4.4 million. So that means salary and benefit is the major driver for the
Okay.
structural deficit for the first year of the budget and the second year of the budget. Even if we like let's go back to general fund, even if we reduce the service and supply, you only have like it's equal around 8.3 million. So that means it's not sufficient to
very much
balance the
money,
budget, especially like what happened in the last few budget cycle. The department has already cut the service and supply because this is the most easy thing to cut without impact any full-time employee. So the department has already like take reduction in the service and supplies. In addition, the city, we have not provide any CPI increase for the next round budget. This is on top of the reduction. So that means when you look at the service and supplies, it's pretty much like remain very flat year over year. You see like a $300,000 increase. This is mainly due to the increase in the animal control. The county charged the city more on the animal control, and also the other is the crime net. They charge a significant higher amount on the crime net, so that make up the $300,000 increase in the service and supplies. When you look at program costs, other charges, pretty much like the same year over year.
Yeah, we can't come out of this just by not buying paper clips or office supplies. We've already done all that stuff.
Yeah, all those other, as you'll see when each of the departments present their budgets, those services and supply, all of those costs are de minimis compared to the costs in each one of the budgets for salaries and benefits.
May I request a chart containing projected versus actual budget of the general fund since 2009 to 2017. So basically, you'd have 16 columns, 8 per each, containing what was projected and what was the actual.
For revenues or expenditures?
For both,
For both?
yes. So basically, 16 columns, but you have 2 different subjects.
From 2009
Since the recession, correct, to
to
2017.
2017.
Thank you. That will answer your question.
Shall we move on to the city manager closing comments? Okay, Pat.
I'll say, hang on, I'm making a note about what we need to get. So, in closing, I want to make just a few observations. As I look to the end of June and my retirement from the city of Daly City, I have to tell you that in the 38 years I've worked in local government, this has been the most difficult budget to have to deal with, and primarily because many of the budget cutting strategies that have been implemented in the past are gone. And as the finance director and I sat week after week looking at all of the factors that go into putting this budget together, it got increasingly difficult because we basically ran out of ideas about things that we could reduce without completely decimating city services and operations. When you talk about reducing a structural deficit of the magnitude that we have, there are options, but the options are not acceptable. Closing all libraries, that's not acceptable. Closing all the community centers, that's not acceptable. Closing fire stations, that's not acceptable. Contracting out every other service that we can think of, contracting out parks maintenance, contracting out anything, that's not acceptable. And so what we were left with in terms of reducing our operating costs to within the revenue that we project was the most difficult exercise that we've had to go through. The departments were given budget targets for cutting their budgets. And as I went and met with each of the departments and reviewed the list of cost-cutting measures that they came up with, I couldn't, in good conscience, include some of those things in this proposed budget because I thought that it would be an exercise in futility. There is no way that the council or the community would ever support doing some of the things that it would take to reduce the budget to the magnitude that we could live within the revenues that we project. So it has been the most difficult budget that I've experienced putting together, and that includes dating back to 2009 in the midst of the recession, because at that time we at least had the ability to negotiate furloughs, to cut salaries, and everybody took unpaid time, and there were things that we could do, but those kinds of strategies are not available today. All of the shared services that we've done in the past, the consolidation of departments that I initially implemented with bringing library and recreation together, moving parks maintenance to public works, all those things are now gone. Those were options that were really great at the time, and they made sense, and they were cost effective and efficient. But now those opportunities are gone. And as I looked around, I just don't see those same kinds of opportunities. And so what we are facing is really another biennial budget, another 2 years and beyond, where the city is going to continue to struggle. And I'm hoping that with a lot of the new development opportunities on the horizon, assuming they come to fruition, that will help. But again, none of those are projected to raise enough revenue to permanently fix some of these escalating costs that are outside of the control of the city, with those pension obligations and retirement costs. So it is clear that given the lack of cost cutting and efficiency strategies that we have available, that we really have to shift to a longer term view of what needs to happen. And the council may recall that a couple of years ago, we brought in our financial consultant, PFM, to review with you the fiscal sustainability strategy that we developed, and had them review and offer input to validate what we thought it was going to take to achieve fiscal sustainability in the long term. We, based on these new budget numbers, we're going to be having PFM come back before we're done with this budget process to review with you again, for the benefit of the new members of the council, what that fiscal sustainability plan looked like and what the consultants validated needed to happen and the costs that we needed to reduce from our budget going forward if we were ever going to achieve fiscal sustainability long term. We have to continue to do that. That's going to be the overarching responsibility. And as we move forward with potentially a new set of council members in November, in the November election, those members are going to have to embrace the idea of having to do these same things. The outlook is not positive for the next several years, and the idea that we can add programs and services and do a lot of things is not realistic. Not given the numbers we've seen, not given the numbers that our consultants have looked at and have validated that present the concerns that we have outlined for you tonight. The city will really need to continue to evaluate any potential service delivery changes, alternative models to improve efficiency and effectiveness. And if there are opportunities for delivering services in a different way, and maybe not contracting, although contracting still may provide some level of relief and cost savings to the city, but at least to explore other options that we've implemented here, like using nonprofits to do certain things, maybe expanding the use of nonprofits to provide services in the way that we have at the Boys and Girls Club, as we have with the Community Services Center by entering into a contractual arrangement with the Daly City Partnership. There may be other opportunities going forward to explore using other organizations to deliver services and not the city. Obviously, the city's got to continue to promote economic development and to identify ways to diversify revenue. The council has heard me say many times over the years, as critical as new housing is for us, and that we will continue to build new affordable housing, housing does not pay for itself. Housing does not, the revenue that we generate from new housing does not pay for the expenditure of city services for those new residents that the housing generates. And so there's a balance that we need to make between commercial development and residential development, because commercial development generally uses fewer services than residential development does. And so we have to have that equilibrium reached and diversify those revenue sources. We also have to look at achieving full cost recovery for city services. And over time, the council has been reluctant to raise fees to the level that is 100% cost recovery across every service that the city delivers. That's been particularly true with recreational programs, senior programs, and those kinds of things. But unless you begin to explore getting as close to as possible to 100% cost recovery going forward, you are going to continue to be in a deficit situation where it's costing us more to pay the employees who are delivering the services than we are getting back in the fees for those services. Another area that I think going forward the city needs to seriously consider, and I mentioned this to the council when we provided a review for you of the facilities assessment, and that is to look at opportunities to dispose of surplus properties to reduce operating and maintenance costs long term. When we talk about city assets, we look at assets as being those facilities or structures or property that is generating some economic benefit for the city to maintain those assets. So, for example, City Hall is an asset because in this operation we have a variety of services that are generating revenue for the city. So the activities that go on in this building make this an asset. 350 90th Street across the street, that is a city-owned building. It's an asset for us because the revenue that we are getting from the leases of the 3 floors over there, the 2 floors, help to offset the costs that we are providing for in-kind space to the Community Services Center, to the Daly City Partnership, and on top of that, it provides lease revenue above that for the city to use for other purposes. The same way with the building that we have on 91st Street. It also, the leases that we have with San Mateo County make that building an asset for us. We're making more revenue on it than we are expending. Over time, that's going to change because that building is getting older and it's going to need more investment. Community services, community centers, we are running programs that raise revenue for the city. So those are assets. But when you have assets, for example, like the one I expressed to you when we did the facilities assessment, like Lawson Hall, we are expending more money to maintain that building than we are getting any revenue because we don't get any revenue from it. So that we don't really consider an asset because it's costing us more than it is providing a benefit to us. And there may be others. At one point we talked about 200 Northgate, where the Westlake School for Performing Arts is located. Again, while I recognize that the council is not going to consider at this time disposing of that property, if that property were sold for residential development, you would have ongoing revenue instead of the fact that we are putting more money into maintaining a building that's over 50 years old and falling apart, and the lease revenue we get from the Westlake School for Performing Arts and others that lease space in there or have historically are not paying for all of the expenditures to maintain that building. Unless lease revenue pays for what it's costing us to maintain that asset, then it's not really an asset to us. So I think that is going to be an area that going forward the City Council and the city departments will have to work together and look at that and see, are there opportunities to eliminate some of those facilities that are not true assets for us and are really a drain on the general fund. Finally, it's going to be necessary to implement a long-term financial plan to address all of the issues that we've talked about at great length tonight regarding escalating pension contributions, retiree health expenses, the underfunding of operating costs. The departments can barely function with the limited additional operating funds that they are given every year because of the escalating costs of supplies and other things that they need to deliver those services. And finally, as we mentioned in the facilities assessment, long-term, there's going to have to be a plan developed in order to address the deferred maintenance of city facilities, because those city facilities that truly are assets that are generating revenue and providing for service delivery, as they get older and older and older, if the maintenance needs are not being addressed appropriately on an annual basis, they soon will become loss centers for us because we will be expending more money on them than we are actually receiving. those are the big challenges that lie ahead for the City of Daly City and all of the city's operating departments. But the city departments stand prepared to work with the council to address these issues. I am certain that whomever the city council selects going forward as the new city manager will provide the leadership to guide the city departments and work collaboratively with the council to address these issues. But as a team, the city council and the city organization are going to have to work even harder going forward to address these issues, to ensure the solvency of this municipal corporation going forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martel. I do have a couple of comments. You mentioned having a consultant come in 2 years ago about looking at some sustainability measures. Was that the first time we had a consultant look at?
No, it is not. We have been working with our financial consultants
Consistently.
for 4 years.
Okay, so you mentioned a long-term financial plan moving forward. Have we ever created a long-term financial plan in the past?
The long-term financial plan that we developed as a result of the structural deficit that stemmed from the downturn in the economy in 2009, we started working on it, and we started implementing a number of factors to try and reduce the growth of expenditures. Where the need arose for us to create a financial plan was as a result of the recession, when PERS came back to us and said, cities, your rates are going to increase substantially. And it was at that point in time that we had to look at how are we going to afford the rate increases to help restore PERS in their funded liability, unfunded liability, to address that. And we had to look at where are we going to get the additional revenues to be able to do that. And it was at that point that we started building the long-term financial plan to get there. Prior to the recession, we had a balanced budget, and we, even though we were continually reducing wherever we could, and we had a balanced budget.
No, I
Right,
understand
not
that that
going
was
into
a
the-
difficult predicament that had happened, an unfortunate one, and really trying to see how we could be afloat amongst things. For me, I was just wondering if there was anything that I could look back upon as far as like any kind of financial plan looking forward, understanding that it was unfortunate that happened with the recession and then CalPERS. So I was just, you mentioned.
Well, we are going to be reviewing with you why the financial plan was developed 4 years ago and what it looked at and why, and then how we see that being implemented fully going forward.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question I have around our development fees, have we, when was the last time it was updated? You know, it was mentioned earlier with the population of our community increasing to about 34%. And have we, looked upon when was the last time our development fees were increased? And is there any possibility there for us to look at some increase in revenue?
So we increased fees pretty much across the board in a couple of years ago. Yeah, we did a cost recovery study and looked at all of the different operations to determine where we were in terms of fees that we were collecting and whether we were covering our costs, and development fees were part of that study. Now, the one thing that you have to consider with development fees is that it's a fine balance between extracting as much revenue as possible from those who want to develop, and then creating what many people believe are unreasonable development fees and discouraging people from coming here to develop. So
I understand
if they
that.
reach a certain level, then you're not going to have as many
just wanted to
people.
know when the
They'll build
last
somewhere
time-
else where
last time we
it's
had
not
it.
as costly.
Yeah, I wanted to know when was the last time we had updated our fees.
I think it was
and-
about 3 years ago.
It's around 2 years ago. There's some category that we charge higher than what they recommend. And at the same time, there are some fee categories a little bit lower. There's room for improvement. Again, as the city manager mentioned, we don't want to like increase the fee to a way that it discourage resident or business to use our
No,
to use the city,
we
yeah.
want to entice
yeah. We want to
people to
entice
come
them to come here to do
Daly
business.
City,
Yeah.
but I also want to just make sure that what we have is, also, if anything, I mean, we have adjacent cities next to us, and, if there's anything where we could do a study, what's comparable, like, let's not go way out of field, because I understand what we're saying, we're not trying to deter people from coming here, but I also just want to see where we're at there, since we're trying to kind of look at every single possibility here.
Well, we generally do survey neighboring cities when we raise fees to see where we will fall when we raise fees. The same way that we provide that kind of information when we raise rates for things like water and sanitation as well. So when we do that, we show you where we fall among all the other cities around
Okay.
us.
I guess this is for a separate, not necessarily the budget, but I'd like to request the staff to see where we're at in all of the adjacent cities next to us around our development fees.
We will provide them when the EC redirected, she present the budget next week. Those information will be available.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments from my colleagues? Okay, seeing none. All
Not if it makes this meeting last any longer.
right, let's move on.
I knew I should have eaten dinner.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, do you feel like taking a 5-minute break for the restroom at the moment, or, I mean, I don't.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
let's just go.
Okay,
Okay.
5 minutes.
All right,
Yeah, let's go
so
5
staff has said, so, sure.
Unless
let's take a-
somebody's delivering a pizza in 5 minutes.
What a great idea.
I can sit here and wet my pants.